Eddie's in the house. You're in Mancunia.
Yeah.
This weather is awful. I'm sorry. The day you leave tomorrow, it's the sunshine arrives. I do apologise.
No, actually, I was cruising around today, and it was absolutely beautiful. I had the sun on my back, and wound up sitting in some amazing plaza, looking at magazines and drinking coffee, and it really was beautiful. I caught some sunshine. I was lucky.
Well, last night, Eddie was playing at Yes, wonderful little venue, and Coco in London, and there was just such an amazing vibe in there when you came on. There was a real expectation, because you've got I think a cult following, a very passionate following of people now, building up, and it was a good one.
Yeah, it did feel really good. I love performing so much, and I don't know. It's just kind of like it's the thing that I enjoy. It's actually the thing that I have always enjoyed most about being a musician is getting up in front, and I guess you experience this as a DJ, and I've always felt this way. I've always felt that it's like this reciprocal back and forth thing that you have going, and I've never really felt like I'm performing for them. I feel like I'm listening to them, and then we're having a conversation, and that's what I've always appreciated the most about live performance. So getting to do it again is amazing.
I have to say, when you came on stage, I thought you looked like a mank. I mean, I've never seen a man with so many Northwest influenced cagoles in my life.
That's a trip. I mean, last time I was here was in 1992 with Charles, so...
Jesus. I mean, the city must have been so different then. That's 31 years ago.
Yeah, it looks like a completely different place. And also, I don't know, it's like it seems like all these towns are just going through this massive growth period right now.
Yeah.
There's just cranes everywhere, and all these new buildings, and new sidewalks, new streets, new generations of young people pounding the streets, It's crazy.
I mean, it was so funny. All my friends, some of them are into music, some of them aren't, going, who is this guy? And it was quite funny. One person thought you had been in Chips. I kid you not. Which I thought, actually... I
thought that was hilarious.
I Googled it. I thought, fucking hell, was he in Chips?
There's some similarity there.
Milli Vanilli, which is a bizarre one. I mean, I got called Todd Terry the other week in Scotland, which was quite unusual.
Yeah.
But what the... as you describe it yourself, how the fuck? You've been in storage for 30 years and you're back.
Truly. Yeah, I can't actually describe it myself. It's sort of like, my brother said this morning, it's kind of like you won the lottery twice. So, yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say is that I am unbelievably appreciative and grateful that people are interested in the music that I'm making with John Carroll Kirby, and it's pretty mind-blowing to me, and yeah, I'm just grateful,
Yeah, I mean, do you pinch yourself thinking, Jesus, you went into storage, literally, 30 years, and now you're back, and it feels like there's these two albums, and now with the most recent album, it just feels like, wow, where did that come from? Because you know what, when I first heard your album around COVID, as you know, I was hitting you up and messaging. It blew my mind. It was like, and now the new album too, and it just. Do you pinch yourself and think, how did this moment come back to write this kind of music?
Well, it has been something that in the off time, I have been stewing and making notes and thinking about music. I mean, music's kind of in every pore of my body. It's something that I just been doing ever since I was a child. I've owned recording studios and been making music, and so in the time when the music business wasn't really moving in my favor, my heart was still in music.
Yeah.
Your heart doesn't really keep score, as to how you're doing on the business side of things. So I would always tell my wife, I'd say, man, if I ever did get the opportunity to make music again, I know that I would just want to make a record that you would have to be my age to make. And I kind of had this fascination with the idea of like, what happens when you have this sort of like skill set, whatever your skill set is, that you've mastered and spent your whole life working on, and then you're suddenly just put to sleep for 30 years? Like, does it fade, or does it like wine? Does it improve with time? And so in making Pleasure, Joy, and Happiness, it was somewhat of a control experiment for me. I wanted to know the answer to that question. Where is my talent at this point in time?
And I guess meeting John Kirby, I mean, for me, it is the combination of both of you that has made this incredible alchemy.
Oh man, he's been unbelievably instrumental. I mean, he was the person that nurtured me out of retirement, and he was he had a very gentle way of doing it, where I actually didn't really know what was happening, because he would just send me texts and say, do you want to come over and jam?
And how did you meet?
We met through a really random kind of a strange way. I wasn't doing music any longer, but I was always trying to help my friends that were doing music, and I knew a guy who had owned a great record company in New York called Terrible Records, and he had put out a Solange single and a Blood Orange single, and he knew John, and I took a meeting with him in the hopes that maybe he would enjoy the music of one of my best friends who's trying to get his career off the ground. And at the end of the meeting, he said, so what's your story? And I gave him like the 60-second abbreviated version of my story. You know, basically, I was a one-hit wonder in the 90s, and then things kind of came crashing down. And, you know, I'm just kind of in a place of it's a tough business. I was hurt that things went the way they went, but I also was super appreciative and felt lucky that I had the opportunity to even do what I did, you know. And the last thing he said to me was, he said, we got to see what we can do about getting you back into the music business. And I got in my car and I drove away, and I said, that's really weird. And then 2 days later, he texted me and he just said, hey, I have this harebrained idea. Call me up. I called him up and he said, there's this guy, John Carroll Kirby. He just did the last 2 Solange records. And I just have this weird feeling that you two would get along. And I'm thinking to myself, like, well, yeah, I mean, of course I'm going to want to work with him. I'm like a 56-year-old guy that hasn't made a record in 30 years, you know, but I don't really know why he's going to want to work with me.
Yeah.
So that led to a 20-minute coffee that turned into a 3-hour meeting of us playing each other's song ideas. I remember I was singing to him in his car, like my voice, and singing him lyric ideas and things.
You know, it's funny because we were chatting before, and like seeing you last night, I was telling you that I don't read much. I have no attention, and I was reading, just looking at loads of podcasts on YouTube and stuff about this Stoicist, Marcus Aurelius, ancient Rome. I'm not as intelligent as it sounds, to be honest. I just nicked all the information off podcasts. But there was one of the sayings, which was a more fatty, I think is the word, which is about loving your fate. And it seems that fate has played a huge role in your journey, because when you met Charles in New York,
yeah,
and he saw Trouble Man,
yeah,
Marvin Gaye album, and that happened, and then John, 30 years, it seems that synchronicity, serendipity and fate has really steered something to arrive here.
Well, I would have to agree with you on that. I've always been the type of person that you know, I grew up with, my dad was a truck driver, and I grew up in the suburbs of Oakland, San Francisco, and my dad would always say, you know, with whatever you're trying to pursue, just look at the rung on the ladder that's right in front of you, and one day you'll look down and be like, oh, I can't believe how high I got. So I've always had this kind of like sort of working class pursuit of being very hard working and not really being ambitious, but being more just like focus on what's in front of me, stay in the moment, and one day you'll look back and be very surprised at the journey that you've taken, you know. So it kind of, I think about that a lot, because there was a retrospective that a German radio station did recently, and I listened to it myself, and I just kind of couldn't believe that all the things that they were talking about actually were things that it was my life. You know, I felt like I was listening to the life story of someone else or something. So yeah, it has been just a series of things of me just putting one foot in front of the other, and just trying to be like, have good work ethic and be really good at what I do, so that if an accident ever did happen, I wouldn't let the family down. I always wanted to be worthy of whatever breaks came my way, you know?
I love last night when you said about your mum and said, can you look at yourself in the mirror?
And like what you see.
And like what, and how do you feel?
Yeah, well, that
apart from being a ruggedly handsome bastard. Oh, you are. You know, that as a Mancunian fusion, LA. But how, you know, when you do, seriously though, how do you feel, you know, when you do? Look.
Yeah, I feel that it's very it's so gratifying to me because when I made Pleasure, Joy, and Happiness with John Carroll Kirby, um, I couldn't believe that he was giving me the time of day, but he is an incredibly beautiful person who is giving in this way. And he also comes from that same perspective that he's not chasing after the money or the charts or keeping score. He's just doing things that actually make his heart leap. Yeah. And so he's coming from the right place. So when I made Pleasure, Joy, and Happiness, I just thought, well, nobody's going to hear this record, but I will have gotten closure on what has been somewhat of a painful last few chapters. And I always really believed in myself as an artist, and I always felt that I had something to offer. And so when I made Pleasure, Joy, and Happiness, I tried to just put my nose to the grindstone and put forth all the things I've been thinking about for the last 30 years, And I am very proud of it. And I do look myself in the mirror, and I do think you made that record. And it's just quite a shock to me because we didn't have any money. We didn't have any PR. It was my friend Jack Sills who had a little record company, one guy called Dan Records. He put it out because all the other record labels that we sent it to said, it's kind of boring and it doesn't really have anything that sticks out. It's kind of flat. And I was like, well, that's what I'm trying to do. I want to do something that's like very sort of kind and gentle and soft and linear.
Last night, I think what I found remarkable about last night was it was so gentle, sublime, and there's a real fragility, vulnerability to what you do because you're not coming on strutting about. There's a real, when you sang the a cappella Morning
Sun, yeah.
My God.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, that was my intention, I did come up in the pop music industry, and I was a staff songwriter for all the big publishing companies for 18 years. And when you're in that game, it really is all about I don't know. You're always analyzing the bridge and the chorus. Is it strong enough? Is it hitting hard enough? And I just wanted to, for once in my life, sort of do something that flew in the face of all that. What about just doing something that just emanates from exactly who you are and is a true snapshot of what's going on inside your mind and body at this moment in time? Yeah. And so I suppose, the most beautiful thing about it is that it is a quiet record, and people shared it amongst themselves. They shared it with their friends and people that they wanted to introduce cool music to, and as a result of that, the record somehow miraculously found a way.
I mean, you probably don't realise this, but when you were here last 92 till now, 30 years, there's been in Europe a real kind of melting pot of people that came through Acid House who opened their minds to so many different forms of music. And I was reminded last night the amount of love and warmth in the room that people have come from maybe a house music tradition but have been listening to soul music and all these different, and this what we Balearic as we call it, but they were there in mass, and there was it was just a really beautiful atmosphere. It's like big alpha men hugging each other, and there were some big units in there. I mean, I'm a leaner. I was at the back leaning. I can't do gigs these days without leaning. Same in clubs, I'm a leaner. But there was a beauty in that room, and I think and gentle, and I think that takes a lot of balls because there's not big kick drums. It's not loud and effervescent. Well, it is effervescent, but not in that loud kind of way. Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, I think I was saying, it was funny. Somebody, I like to go to the merch counter so I can meet the people that listen to my music after the shows. Merch. And but one guy walked up to me and he bought a T-shirt and he said, I don't listen to your kind of music. I'm really a super you can see from my vibe, I'm a heavy metal guy. And he said, but I found your record because this guy who brought me to the show told me all about you. And he said, it's become like my favorite record. And I've never enjoyed a record like this before. And I thought that was really, really cool. Yeah.
And I think, when I listened, I think, John Kirby in his own right, I mean, the production, the musicality, I mean, it's exceptional. It really is.
Well, I personally think that John Carroll Kirby is one of the greats of our time.
I agree, 100%.
I really do. He's so prolific, and what he's putting out is just it's so beautiful. It almost reminds me of like my favorite like Miles Davis records when he was just knocking down barriers and doing completely his own thing, like Bitches Brew and these things that are like really wild. And he was just he was. I think that John Carroll Kirby is making some records that feel like a psychic jailbreak to me.
I mean, there's a real kind of I don't know whether you have this word in LA, wonkiness to it. It's got this.
That's how I describe it, actually. I use that very word.
Yeah. I love the word wonk.
I always say rotten and broken.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
The broken man. But I love that. There's a psychedelia to it. There's an off-kilter, and there is an alchemy between your very beautiful vocal, but there's also this kind of modernity without sounding too Channel 4 late night about this, which mixes, and it's just a load of the youngsters are loving it as well. And it feels a modern record, and I really believe, I'm not going to tell people where you're going soon in the next year because you'll kick me, but it seems that you're getting a lot of recognition. It feels like this is potentially the beginning of another part of your journey.
Well, I'm not thinking about that at all. I'm just sort of taking it day by day, and I am, I do have this kind of PTSD from all of my years of being a musician, and I think every freelancer on the planet can relate to this. Every time I come out from that, the guy comes backstage and he says 5 minutes, and then I'm supposed to go on stage. I always think I'm walking out to 4 or 5 people, and then I walk out, and of late, it's a lot of people, and the houses are getting bigger and bigger. But I still think to myself, you're walking out and there's going to be 4 or 5 people. But I also think to myself, this thing that, it's not the amount of people that are in the house, it's the size of your heart. And that's all I think about,
Yeah.
So it would be perfectly okay if it was 4 or 5 people. But yeah, it is a kind of PTSD that I think anyone who's an artist or a freelancer or shows their work, because you have to be so courageous and brave to show your work, But yeah, that's where I'm from.
Bring us the record over, would you please? We're not doing some mad promo thing here, but I want to show people this. It's just and it's Sundown, and it's funny actually, because I can't believe you ended up in Ibiza with a pal of mine in his house writing music. I mean, Sundown, it all feels like that's mad.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, did you turn him on to the record? I don't really know.
I don't think so. This is what I'm saying.
Crazy.
Well, I'd love to say I did, but
yeah.
It was me. But
well, I guess this was partially recorded at his house. I got a DM from a guy who I didn't know on Instagram, and he said, my family, my wife and my children, we all listened to Pleasure, Joy, and Happiness just basically on repeat throughout the darkest days of COVID, and it was really, really healing for us. And I want to give you a gift. And I called him up, and we talked, and he was a super sweet guy, a lovely guy. And he said, we have a beautiful house in Ibiza, and I would like to gift it to you to just go and stay there. The only thing that I would ask you, he said, we won't be there. The house is yours. The only thing that I would ask you is that you do something creative with the space. So I immediately got on the phone with John Carroll Kirby, and I was like, let's go make a record. And he was really keen on that. And then my wife came, and my wife, as everybody knows, directs all of my videos. So we not only wrote, a big part of this record there, but my wife also made a music video there of the song Comes and Goes. So it was really cool. And
so listen, next year, I want that to happen again, but I want you to invite me so I can play a Fat Bez in the background with maracas.
Yeah, I feel like absolutely, man.
2 months in sunshine.
You got it.
As well, the other thing, and before we sort of round this up, I thought the band last night was shit hot. I mean, and I couldn't believe that it was just again a bit of a serendipity. A band that you loved, that you had. Yeah. It was a bit of a punt, right?
I mean, I am really, I think I've always had elements of this from the time I was young, but at this age of 59 now, I more than ever just move on when things feel right to me. And when they do feel right to me, I just don't really second guess it. I feel that there's a higher voice that's sort of reaching out to me, and all I need to do is get out of my own way and be a good listener. So, to make a long story short, the Zen Men, who I'm a big fan of and have been listening to for 3 years, Ben from the Zen Men wrote me and he said, "Hey, I saw that you're playing in Berlin and we live in Berlin. Can we open for you?" And so they did. They opened the show, but as a fanboy, I was standing on the side of the stage and I was just watching them, and I just love them so much. They're real, you know. They actually are three guys that have been playing together. They're not hired guns. And I thought to myself, a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, wow, I wonder if they would ever be interested in backing me on a tour. So that was just a hunch that happened, and it came together, and here we are. We're on tour now, and I have the beautiful, these three beautiful guys who are the Zen Men backing me.
And last night you played the Papa tune.
Oh yeah, I love that song. Yeah.
And was that where you with John? Was that a John connection there?
Yeah, that was a real. I always talk about that because that song was a real turning point for me. Because you know it's really weird when you get in the room with a new person to make music and you don't know them and they don't know you, and it oftentimes, frankly, is a fail. And I got in the room with John, and I already had that intimidation factor that was sort of in the way of me absolutely being able to be myself. But, you know, I showed up with something, and he would always say to me, put me on the spot and say, "What do you got?" And so I started to come with prepared things. And I said, well, I have this thing, you know, I was quite timid and sort of embarrassed to share it because it is very tender and very personal to me. And I shared the lyric and some of the melody ideas to Papa with him, and he just listened super intently, and then he turned around and said, "I absolutely love this, and I think we should record it." And in that moment, I just had this kind of like feeling that like, this is the guy for me. This is my guy, you know, because I did know, I had conveyed to John that I wanted to make a record that was very vulnerable, very tender, and allowed for that to be there, and didn't put a sheen on it, didn't try to cover it up. And I also said a funny thing to him that is real counterintuitive. I said, I want the record to be so smooth that nothing sticks out, which is really weird because when you're making records, you're thinking like, what's the banger chorus, you know? And he was just so responsive to that, and wanted and agreed that would be a great thing to do, and he sure knew how to do it.
Incredible. And it was funny because a very good friend of mine, Dan Hope, I was with last night, he didn't know about you really, and he came along and he said this thing which struck me afterwards, and he said, and I don't want to blow smoke up your ass or embarrass you, but he said you came across as such a grateful person, you were clearly happy to be there, and I thought that really summed it up actually. There was no strutting about, and it just felt right.
Well, that's really cool, and I'm really happy to hear him say that, because I am really happy to be where I am. I can't believe that any of this happened to me. I was happy before. I have my health. I have a lovely wife, and I have been blessed even before any of this happened. I've been blessed with a beautiful family, and all the important things are in place. You know, so this truly is extra. So when I'm on that stage and when I meet the people that enjoy my music, I do just feel like super humbled and gracious that I get to do this. You know, it's a gift. I have to say thank you, Luke, for having me. I mean, I just been a fan for quite a long time, and I was very excited to come and meet you, and I knew that you and I would get along. Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate it.